Hello, everybody watching. It's Matt from Soundrolling.com, and I'm here with Bill Devine, talking all things ADR mixing and voice recording. Bill has done a tremendous amount of shows, Battlestar Galactica, even Thundercats, the most recent versions, and many more that we'll get into in our discussion today about all things ADR. So, hello, Bill.
Hello, everybody.
And so, Bill, I mean, I always start with the kind of classic question of just how you got into the ADR room and what kept you there.
Well, I began recording and mixing music and playing music, and I believe that music sessions are the best entry into any sort of session work because there's a rhythm and a flow that goes into any session work. And if you're going to be successful at it, you sort of have to learn how to do what you're doing without being obtrusive, and also listening to the room and getting the temperature of the room. And it's sort of like you're there and you're being jovial and talking with people, but in the background of your mind, you're always keying into what they're getting ready to do in the next moment. And music session work is sort of the best way to learn that sort of feeling that you get. It gets way more serious and way more, well, I should say, less fun than music when you get into TV and film, because you have, serious people and actors and producers and directors, and they'll sit and talk about all sorts of things that have nothing to do with what you're doing, but on a moment's notice they'll turn and say, okay, well, let's try that line. And if you haven't been preparing and listening and being ready for that, you will miss that opportunity, and then people start to get upset. and it only takes 10, 15, 20, 30 seconds of pausing and not doing what it was they asked you to do in that moment to make that happen. So you want to be able to sit back and enjoy the conversations, but just always at the ready. And so my start was music, and it was a natural transition when it happened for me. And it set me up nicely. I felt when I got into ADR, it felt sort of like the same thing, if that makes any sense.
Mm.
It was as far as the rhythm of the session goes. And then once I got into it, I managed, and the way it works in ADR is if you're good at it and you don't sync, you stay there. And then as you get better, people like you, because ADR is a very difficult type of session to maneuver. And when people find somebody who can actually do an ADR session correctly, they keep you and they call you when they want to use you. And that's kind of what happened to me. I just sort of kept getting the calls and kept getting booked. And it wasn't what I set out to do necessarily, because I also mix, I also sound design, I also record voice for animation. And I still do all of that, but predominantly I'm an ADR mixer these days. I'd say 70% of the time.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, it's a really good kind of the skills are all kind of in the same areas. Especially interested in how kind of the animation aspect and recording all the various animations kind of translated in terms of your skills of an ADR mixer. Is it essentially, when it's for animation, exactly the same type of session but without syncing?
It's well, I would say it's actually very different, because in animation, when you record the initial script, it's recorded with a very nice microphone in a very clean environment. You're in a room, a studio that's antiseptically quiet and clean, and the actor is exactly the right distance from the microphone, and it sounds amazing. So when you go to replace that later on, you're doing the same microphone, same actor, same distance from the microphone. It's going to match all the time. Whereas with TV and film, you've got people holding booms and they're lavs, and they've got costumes over the lavalier microphones, and some of these actors are running and falling, and some of the microphones fail, and so they have to go to the boom microphone. And so when we go to do the ADR for a film or a TV show, we have to sort of match all those scenarios so that the new ADR line will flow into that original line seamlessly. So if they're running and huffing and puffing, we kind of have to get that same activity and the movement of the lavalier and the boom. And when we shoot a live action actor, we've got them boomed and laved while we shoot the ADR, and that gives the mixer the choice in the mix of saying, let's use that boom microphone for this line and see how it flows in and out of production. And if the match doesn't happen, let's try the lavalier. And because it has to, if it jumps out at you, then it's a bad ADR line. It's not going to work. It's going to sound horrible. It needs to fool the audience. The audience has to believe that it was done on that day. So live action, it's a whole different ballpark. Animation, it's almost always going to match in. And obviously with animation, the lip sync is way more forgiving than live action. It's a real person on the screen with real lips versus a cartoon character. So you can actually be quite a bit off from your original animation line, and it still looks really good.
Okay.
So
nice. So in terms of so they're when you're doing it for animation, they're wearing like the little bobbles on their head, and they're getting the lip sync automatically recorded as well.
No, with animation, they're watching. I'll back up a second. With animation, the first step in animation is to record the script, and then they animate to that recording, right? So they do all the drawings, and then 9 months later, all the stuff is finished up and it comes back, and that's when they decide, okay, let's ADR this line. So now the actor is actually watching their animated, let's say it's SpongeBob. The guy who does SpongeBob, Tom Kenny, is watching his SpongeBob character on TV, moving its mouth, and he's attempting to fit this new line of dialogue into that mouth motion that's been animated. So he's actually watching like you would watch a cartoon on TV while he delivers the line. And we'll do that, as many times as it takes before we all say that's a good take. And of course it has to be not only lip sync, but the acting has to be correct, the energy has to be right, it has to sound good coming from the previous line into the ADR and then back into the production sound. So it's not what you're describing is more like motion capture, where they have that kind of thing. But they're literally watching themselves on TV. They have a TV in the room, and they're seeing it, and we beep them in, and they attempt to do the line while they watch the TV.
Right, got you. So in terms of when you obviously work with a lot of actors, regardless of if it's animation or live action. Who else is in the room with you? So there's you, the director, and the talent. Is that it?
Well, if it's a TV or a live action TV or a movie with real actors, the actor, the director, and the sound supervisor will be actually on the stage together, and I'll be in the control room. There might be an executive or somebody else behind me. With animation, the only people on the stage are the actors. And in the room with me would be a voice director and typically storyboard artists, maybe. Sometimes the person who wrote the script will be there in case there's an issue with a line, and they say, well, can we say this differently? And that person will typically come up with a different way of saying it if that's needed. With animation, there's a lot more people in the room with me in the control room than in live action. In live action, they tend to all be out with the actor. And I don't know if that's because they all like to hang out with famous people, or but I think it has more to do with they try to mimic what was on set. Like typically when you're on set, the director is right there with the camera and the actor. So I think when they're doing ADR, I think the actor feels better if the director is also in that same proximity. Actually in the room, rather than hearing them on the speakers, they're acting more close up, and I think they kind of respond better and they like that proximity better. So.
Yeah, and in terms of like the, so I guess like what is a good take is I guess up to the director unless you think there's something technically wrong with it, or are you and the supervising sound editor going kind of back and forth a little bit on how you think it's sounding?
Typically, I'm obviously there. I'm steering the boat and listening critically through the speakers and doing that sort of thing and making my own decisions. I will try to, as much as possible, stay out of the discussion and let the sound supervisor, because the sound supervisor is the one that's going to say things like, that was great sync, your pitch sounds a little bit lower today than you did on the set. It seems like you might have been more up here instead of down here. It might have been in the morning or the afternoon, or you should project a little bit. It sounds like, because typically in ADR people tend to talk quieter and act quieter, and it's like no, the person's maybe 6 feet away from you. Project it a little bit more. because you can hear it when we play it back. It'll all of a sudden, you know, energy, 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 low energy, 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 you know, and it sticks out like a sore thumb. So, but I do pipe up when I can tell that nobody is seeing the thing that I'm seeing, and I'll typically say things like let's say the line is, you know, look over there, and I'll say something like, it sounds like there's a big pause between look and over there, a bigger pause than you're giving it, because sometimes the actor is just sort of saying the line and they're not really hearing what they did, and I'm hearing it more as a musical thing, like I hear the rhythm of it, and I'm just trying to help them get sync. Like, they can be concerned with the acting, but I might tell them something mechanical, like put a comma after look, or put a dash after look, whatever, or put an ellipses, you know, put 3 dots after it. Look over there, just to help them get that rhythm, you know, to nail the take. And also, of course, if I hear something, just if they all love what the actor did, and I unfortunately didn't get it right, I have to sheepishly say, sorry, it's way too quiet. We have to do it again. You know, but I'm expected to on the spot have everything perfectly set. Doesn't always happen, but you know, I have to kind of guess what they're going to give me, and sometimes actors blurt something out that I think they're going to be quiet with, and it catches me off guard. And
yeah, I can totally relate when it's just in terms
you
of
can.
like,
I'm sure
we're gonna do this as improv, and it's like, okay. Well,
and you try to gauge from their previous performance.
Yeah.
Quiet. Now they decided to do it big and loud, and you're like, thank you very much. Appreciate that.
I think I've learned, especially I do a bit of part-time teaching, just with like one-day sound classes and things, and it's like one of the few things I say is like, it's always good to get rehearsal, but anytime you get an actor to say anything in a rehearsal, just turn it down a little bit, because it's probably going to be a lot louder than anything they say.
Yeah. I almost always voice director and animation always ask me, do you want to get levels? And I usually, it's kind of pointless because they're not going to do that when we start. So
yeah,
you know, but we sometimes do it just because it kind of signals everybody that we're getting ready to record. So I'll go through with the charade like, yes, let's all get levels. I know these are meaningless right now, but let's do it. And we start and it's all wrong. So
everyone sit and play nice.
Yes.
Oh, brilliant. And I'm just trying to imagine, so it's going to look like an ADR booth, it's going to look exactly like a voice recording booth. But in terms of when you're getting the movements and the action, it must be really hard to try and keep separate the clothes movement from getting on the ADR, or how are you dealing with situations where they need to be quite frantic? Do you make them run around the studio a few times and then stand? Go.
Yeah, well, with some, you know, it's usually up to the actor. Some actors, you know, the more macho actors, like to get down and do some push-ups, and then they have that out of breath feel. Some people will do jumping jacks, or they'll run in place a little bit. You know, it depends on how method they are. Some actors are super method, and they want to really feel how they felt that day, and they get back to that place, and they can get really manic in the studio. But as far as the cloth stuff, we tend to refer to that as free Foley, meaning it's going to be on the recording, but it's also going to help. It's going to help it be natural anyway, because that's going to be the sound from production, and it will probably match. Because the one thing that took me a very long time to understand with ADR is that it's not about getting a clean recording; it's about getting a recording that will match. So, and typically production audio is anything but clean, and 9 times out of 10, we're, you know, TV, at least in America, is this lavalier microphones. That's the predominant microphone over the booms, which are actually the more expensive, nicer sounding microphones. So if we're trying to match a lavalier, why are we trying to get a clean recording with a very expensive boom microphone? It's never gonna dip in and back out of production, you know, to the mixer satisfaction. The mixer's going to sit there and say, it sounds ridiculous. So it's okay that things are a bit dirty and a bit you know, clunky, and some sound and some shuffling and even some foot sound on the carpet. Because the thing is, the microphones are super sensitive to the point where you hear, you know, like this type of sound in the room. So of course we're going to hear breaths and everything. So that's all okay. It actually works quite well often with doing things, and sometimes we'll even have them purposefully turn off access from the microphone and come into a scene so that it's not all super direct, on axis nicely. Like everything that you learned, you kind of throw out a little bit, and you want to get back to, if the person's coming into the room, it's okay if they walk up to the microphone as opposed to just always being on mic. Because if they're far away and they're coming into the scene, if they're always on mic, it sounds artificial. So you kind of, in some respects, have to recreate it. Sometimes it doesn't work because you get too much of a room sound. But it's sort of trial and error. We'll try a few things. I'll often go into the room and readjust the microphone. If it's too present, I'll push it back a little bit and then crank up my gain, or do the opposite if it feels like it needs some more bass to the voice. I'll put the mic closer and mess around. But typically we get away with about 2 or 3 head lengths away from the microphone, the boom mic, and some productions like the lavalier pinned to the actor, and sometimes we just put it on the stand in front of them.
Okay.
Some people like that as well. So.
Okay, and what's the kind of difference in the sound there? Because surely you're losing quite a lot of the
you lose the chest
frequencies.
Yeah, because I the one thing that does work with lavaliers is that chest sound that you get, because it's right there, right on the chest. I think, to be honest, half the time it's because I work with a wireless, and typically during the day we have many actors in and out, and we have had situations where they leave with my microphone pinned on them, and we have to go running out in the parking lot and get it back, and we're not fast enough. Or if it's wired, they walk away and they get yanked back like a dog leash. So I think that's why people settle on the stand approach, and it's close enough, I guess.
Yeah.
Everybody's liking. So, but it's hard. It's hard as an audiophile, and like I said, starting in music, to let go of some of those things that you learned about getting a good quality recording, and knowing that no, it's about matching. It's not about great. And it's hard. It's hard because I'm sure you're the same way. You're listening to the lavaliers, and it's not necessarily always the best sound in the world. But then you hear it all mixed into the final product, and it actually works because it's what we've all come to associate with on TV. It's TV sound, and it actually sounds pretty decent.
Yeah. No, it does. It does definitely have its place, especially in all these like louder and louder environments where everyone's squished together. I'm just trying to imagine kind of what your kind of method is for making sure you have some sort of session that's all in order. Are you taking things kind of scene by scene? Are you taking things shot by shot? I mean, obviously things will vary on what needs to be recorded, but I'm assuming that you record more than you actually need.
Well, the sound supervisor, before they even show up or even schedule the ADR, has gone through the whole show, and they've made their wish list of all the lines that they feel should be re-recorded, so that the show has a polished, professional sounding mix. And once they do that, they'll schedule the actors to come in, and so we'll do it by actor rather than by scene. So let's say. For example, today I was recording CSI Las Vegas, and on that show, one of the principals is Ted Danson, and so they will take all of Ted Danson's lines that he needs to ADR, and they'll schedule him and say, okay, Ted, you come in at 10 o'clock, and he'll come in at 10 o'clock, and maybe he has 10 or 15 lines that he has to fix, for example. So he's going to come in, and we're only going to concentrate on his lines, and then he gets to leave. Next actor will come in, maybe that actor has 5 lines. We'll fix his 5 lines, that person will leave, and that will be our day. And typically they schedule ADR for the same day that they're actually doing filming. So they're filming next week's episode, but when they're released from the set, they come over to my stage and we do the ADR for the stuff they did last week. So it's kind of like that way they can fit it all into one day, work day, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So they'll come in and they'll fix all their lines. So it's kind of piecemeal. We'll jump all over the episode and then do the same thing with it. Maybe some actors only have 1 or 2 lines. And today, for example, we also did something called Loop Group, which is a group of actors that aren't on screen, and they handle all that background stuff. Nice. All the murmur stuff, all the if they're in a restaurant, if they're in a a nightclub, if they're, whatever it is, the police in the background. And they do all that conversation that happens in the background, and that's typically like a 4-hour session, and that we'll start at the beginning of the episode and work our way all the way to the end. But like I said, the sound supervisor has cued every single scene specifically with time code, and I have that list, and he's in there with the group, and he'll say, let's move on to the next cue number 25. I type in the time code, we go there, beep, 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 I beep them in, and they do their thing, and they all sit there, and if it's just conversations, they all sit there and pretend like they're small talking in the background. And it's pretty silly and pretty interesting, but pretty amazing what it does to the final product. It makes it all very real and very believable, and it's mixed in at such a quiet level in the final mix, but it's amazing that such care and precision is taken in capturing it all, because it's all specific to that episode. So even to the point of the police radios, we'll put a walkie-talkie on the stage, and put the other walkie-talkie in the control room, and they all sit behind me, taking turns holding the walkie-talkie, pretending like they're police officers.
Fantastic.
We'll record 5 or 6 minutes of that, and it's since it's done through a walkie-talkie, it sounds very realistic, and they'll cut and pepper that into the show as they need it. Whenever they have police cars and you hear the walkie-talkies in the background, and they build entire scenes that way. They do the quiet stuff, they do the call-outs, like if it's a city street, they'll do people talking, and then they'll do the louder stuff where you hear somebody going, hey, no, 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 like saying something in the background, and these guys are amazing. They just roll through 4 hours of this nonsense, just saying things that nobody will ever actually really hear, but they'll kind of hear it in the background.
Yeah, well, they get the atmosphere of it. That's amazing.
Yeah, and it's sort of like recording custom human sound effects, basically, is the idea, rather than finding canned things, because you can find canned things, but they don't always work for your scene that well. But if you have real people in the room and you tell them really what you want and they deliver it, it's time saving, and it sounds much better than you could ever hope, just searching around in your own library. But so yeah, that was my day today. That's what I did today.
Fantastic. And so with those cues and obviously the time code, you're just lining that up in a Pro Tools session, and you're putting in the time code as so it can just be imported as session data for the dialogue editors, or?
Yes, they'll give me a QuickTime movie, and that movie will have a time code window burn. Either down at the bottom or up at the top, and it'll have time code. And most shows have a generic start time. Typically it's usually around 58 minutes. Like CSI is 58:40. Some are 58:30, 59:30. But basically the first frame of the real TV show is always at hour 1.
Yeah.
So the 58 is to accommodate a slate and maybe color bars at the front of the show. But the actual show will begin at 1 hour exactly. And so I'll import that into Pro Tools, and the left audio track of that movie will typically have dialogue, and the right audio track will have music and effects, or M&E track. And that's handy for me because when we replace the line, when we get to that specific line and I'm playing it back, I can duck out the dialogue, but I still have my music and effects to sort of let the people in the room, when they hear my playback, it sort of sounds like the real thing. And they can instantly sort of hear what was recorded in a fairly quick playback that sounds really mixed, and so they can quickly make a judgment call if it's a good loop or not. Whereas if I didn't have that, you'd have to duck all sound, and everything would just get antiseptically quiet, and you'd hear the new line, and then it'd pop back into production, so it would just always sound horrible, So it's kind of anything that I have to help sell what I've recorded, and we move on to the next cue is great, Yeah. I also have in my arsenal some generic fills like traffic, wind, and I can also add a little bit of that in as I needed, during my sessions to help sell the cue. I can bring up a little bit of ambience that I don't have. You don't always have a great ambient track on your M&E track, so if I need some help, I have some of those samples I can bring up too. But that's kind of how it works, and so once you bring in your movie track, it's going to match the Pro Tools time code. So when I have my list of cues, any cue I go to, it's going to be spot on with what the sound supervisor was expecting us to get to, and occasionally we have to, fine tune it when we get there. It feels like the beeps might be late or early, but usually, it's ready to go. So we can, and it also helps us move through the session really fast, since they're obviously spending a lot of money per hour in these on these stages, So,
Yeah.
It's usually a pretty big foot race to make it through the end of the day and get everything that they hope to get. So.
Well, it must be tough, especially with the loop groups and everything else. But in terms of the the pips coming in, the countdown, what times are you putting that in before they're meant to say anything?
The system that I work on at Warner Brothers has been customized by the Warner Brothers engineers. They've programmed in it's kind of been hot rodded, so it has once I type in the time code, it automatically spots the beeps for me,
Right.
and I'll hit rehearse, and the words rehearse will show up magically on the screen for the actor, because this has all been pre-programmed.
Wow.
And it will be a yellow streamer will cut across the screen, as well as beep, beep, beep. And when the two lines meet and that fourth imaginary beep happens, they can do their line. And some actors work really well off a visual cue, some work better off the auditory cue. But you do both, and that sort of helps. For the person you have some people that just don't get it. No matter how you try to explain it, they're not getting. They don't understand.
Was that me? I didn't hear the last beep.
It can be rough sometimes. Then we'll hit record, and that yellow line turns into a red line, and it says record, so everybody's now knowing that we're recording. And then the playback becomes green, and and then we're playing back, and then they hear the sound through the speakers when we're playing back. And so the system is pretty nifty. It's designed to just keep everybody on the stage apprised of where we're at in the process, and so there's no confusion. Sometimes if you don't have all that and you hit rehearse, the actor might think they're actually doing the line for real and attempt to dive in for real, and you're like, oh, sorry, we were just rehearsing, and they start getting upset, and it doesn't just start going downhill. So it's a nice system for that, and it also does a lot of other nifty things. Like after it records, it throws the recorded track up to the appropriate track number for me, instead of me having to drag and drop it.
Wow.
And it will. What you're asking about the beeps. In manual sessions, you do actually have an audio file of your beeps, or pips. I know you guys call them pips over there in the UK.
Yeah.
And in those situations, when I did it manually, I used to, in the hour before my client would come in, I would type in all the time codes and make bookmarks, and sort of have them. I wouldn't pre-place them, because sometimes cues would be very close together, and I wouldn't want to record one cue and then halfway through the cue they hear a beeps for the next cue. So I would just put a bookmark so I could throw them in pretty quickly, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But this system, there's a separate box that generates the beeps, so I don't have to worry about that.
Yeah. Well, I knew it had to be more advanced than obviously my Pro Tools rig at home.
I've done it completely manually, and I've done it this other way, and I sort of flop back and forth between the two. For animation, I do it more manual, and I either pre-program or I just literally enter. I'm really good with my right hand entering time code now. I've done it a lot. I don't have to look as much.
Amazing. And in terms of, loop groups are just amazing. Obviously, if there's, what have I done? I've done like little films where they're in multiple languages and things. So you'd obviously get people that can speak the language. But in terms of like CSI, where it's meant to be kind of, I guess, generic, like English background. Is it the same people doing everything, like all talking through the radio, and then all kind of talking the cafe, and then all?
Yes. It will be. I think for that, like today, it was, I want to say 6 to 8 people roughly, and that's a pretty normal group. We did a couple episodes back have a a Chinatown episode in New York City, so they had to, they had to get a couple of Asian speaking loopers, and all loop groups. There's a loop group leader who sort of has the Rolodex of all the people to call. So if they need, oh, in this episode we have Russian mafia, so we should get a couple of Russian people, or people that have the dialect, or if we need some Spanish speaking, or we need some Cantonese or whatever it is, there's these people just have a list of people they can call, and especially in film, the loop groups get much bigger, maybe more like 12 and 14 people, and depending on where, if the film is all over the world, they might need different people for different days, and it's a multi-day affair with a film. If it's cast of thousands, then of course, the loop groups go on for.
Yeah, I guess we have warlords and yeah.
But, you'd be surprised with a group of 6 people. Once you double and triple it up, it quickly becomes a crowd, and 4 tracks of 6 people can easily kind of match what you would expect 100 people to sound like. You could just make it sound like 100 people very fast, if they're all clapping or cheering or making loud raucous noise. If you need like a battle cry and soldiers, rah, and you get 6 people times 4, it really does sound like a big group of people. So it actually works. It's strange, but it you buy it. You're kind of like, okay, that's enough. We got it.
Yeah. Calm down, stop smashing.
Yeah, it works.
Fantastic. Oh, yeah. Sorry, I'm just getting like lost and just thinking about people rah-rahing and going crazy.
The loop group sessions are pretty fun because they're kind of working the room more, like circling. They typically, like for city streets, they do a pass which they'll call call-outs, and they'll just go down the line. They'll all line up in a half circle and just take turns yelling things. And it's not meant to be played as recorded. It's meant for the editor to have these loud sort of projected things with spaces in between, and they can sort of make their cuts and edits and sort of sprinkle those throughout as needed. It's kind of like a spice. And then when they do the milling around kind of a thing, they'll literally walk past the microphone to give it motion rather than standing still. So they'll walk past the mic while they're talking. So they might do it in pairs, and they call those pass-bys, and they'll just sort of walk by the microphone. So they're all kind of doing this loop in my studio, and it might be a group of them, and they know what they're doing, so they don't step on each other, and they all say their lines, and when you hear it back and you mix it into your show, it has the effect of sounding, it has motion to it, because they're coming away from the microphone, on axis, off axis, and it's way more believable than if they just stood still and done the same acting. It fits in, and it feels like it was actually recorded on the set as opposed to done later on. So it's interesting. They'll do crosses in front of the microphone. They call them donuts when they do it in circles. If it's an interior shot, they'll typically act, and they'll even face away from the microphone into the walls and talk, and instead of facing towards the microphone. So it just sounds like they're background people, and it's just all about recreating what's real. You don't want it to be present and on microphone. You want it to be almost indistinguishable dialogue that you mix in. And I mean, literally, when you're mixing it, your fader is just a couple of notches off of that minus infinity. Like, it's super low, but it's just enough so you can sense it in the background, and then you have your scene playing, and it's you don't hear it, but you'd miss it if it was gone, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. So you're always using kind of just one microphone in the center, and then all these 6 people are just talking around it, or they're talking.
Correct. Yeah.
Right.
It's just up on a boom and recording them. If it's an exterior, we have them get tight on the microphone to minimize their sort of room sound. Because to sound like you're outdoors, you don't want to have any reflections or that boxiness that a room will have. And then if it's in an office, they can stand anywhere they want in the room, even behind the microphone, and it actually works. So they'll just kind of filter all around the room. But the loop groupers, not only are they good at what they do with coming up with the words, but they know how to vary their voices. Like you were asking, like wouldn't it be obvious if the same 6 people, certainly by the end of the episode, you've heard all 6 people. But, they're very good at, kind of being New Yorkish and then being quiet and being deep, and they all have like their range of voices that they can get in and out of very easily, and they know how to sound like cops and dispatch people when they do the radios, and it's pretty interesting to watch.
And in terms of the, just talking types of microphones and things, what sort of things are you usually running for loop groups and I guess talent?
Well, the main mic would probably be a 416. Usually matches production a lot. A Sennheiser 416. A Sennheiser MKH50 or 60 is typically also used to swap out of the whatever production boom was used. For the lav, Electrosonics 411 we use a lot. Also the COS stuff that people like, the Cause microphones. But typically, even if those aren't the specific microphones, those have been proven to be good close matches to the types of mics and lavaliers that people use. I also have up on my tree a Neumann KMR81, and that's a little bit too clean for dialogue, but I use it a lot for loop group, mostly because it sort of disguises my room a little bit. The 416, when I turn it up in my room, I hear the roominess. I hear that kind of boxiness, but the Neumann is kinder, I think, with the off-axis stuff. It doesn't sound so boxy. So when they're all over my room, I'll usually use the Neumann. And if I'm actually doing any sort of dialogue, or we'll also use loop group for efforts. If a main actor was doing something and the production didn't record, like while he's running, somebody from the loop group will match that actor and do the, or if we need or even if it's a really quiet scene and they didn't talk but we want to keep them alive, they'll do the quiet breaths, all that super quiet tender stuff. Sometimes isn't recorded nicely in production, so we'll do it cleanly in ADR, and that gives the mixer like an added something human to bring into that final mix. And again, it's just all this like really quiet stuff that you wouldn't really think would be important, but it's just like these fine sort of little seasoning layers that make that final thing have some depth and sound really nice. And it's when you don't really notice it until you actually add it. And I mean, anybody could do, even on an independent level, you could do this very easily with a project. Maybe not during the actual take, but at a later date. You don't need an ADR stage if you being the production's location mixer, could very easily have that actor come back in, and while they're watching themselves on the screen, same exact mic they used on the day, you could have them sort of do it in a quieter setting, and just to have it mix in the same way. Mixers love to have location guys grab room tones and ambient. Like when the day is done, anytime a production mixer grabs 2 or 3 minutes of just dead air is, it's a godsend down the line, because otherwise we're having to find little 5-second, 6-second clips of it in production and cobble together this, if you have straight room tone, it's priceless. It's amazing. So all that kind of, and it's amazing because it's so quiet. It sounds like it would be nothing, but it's all the stuff that is just so necessary towards that very end stage when they're mixing. And when the mixers have all that stuff, it makes it so nice at the very end.
And what's a good kind of size room tone? Because I'm usually aiming for about, 30 at a push, 45 seconds, kind of knowing that everyone's going to be a bit noisy still for the first 5 and probably the last 5.
Yeah, I would say, as long as you could get, as always, it's all good. If you had 2 minutes, 3 minutes of it, that's great. 30 seconds is even great, because, like I said, if you don't have that, the dialogue editor is carving out 5 and 10 second bits of it and putting it all together with crossfades, and of course, that's not the best of all worlds because it kind of wobbles all over the place. So 30 seconds is priceless, but a minute is twice as priceless. 4 times as priceless. It's all good for different reasons, and if you have, if you have a quiet moment before people have started doing things and you've managed to grab that, you have it in your hip pocket, and um, somebody down the line will love you for it,
Yeah.
even though you might not meet them.
Yeah, that's cool. And so, in terms of like the room that you're in, it's obviously like a full treated studio, and you're
Yeah.
getting everyone to just run around in socks to not have their footsteps in loop group and stuff.
No, typically we let it all fly, and sometimes we get some moving around, and again, we nickname it free foley. It happens, and we have it, and typically that kind of sound, when you turn everything down so much, that's the first thing to disappear. They might also roll off all the highs. The mixer might, before he plays back some of this ADR background stuff, just to make it even more indistinguishable. Because what you really don't want in ADR are specific words kind of accidentally poking out, to draw attention away from the main actors delivering their lines, or whatever the feel for the scene is. Um, so we typically live with all that kind of thing. If I'm doing a principal actor and they're delivering an important line, every once in a while I get somebody with a leather shoe that does a and I have to ask them to take that shoe off, or
Just the one shoe is punishment.
it could be that. People wear baseball hats. They have to, because the noise reflects off the bill of the cap. So those have to be either turned around backwards or taken off completely. Um, Jewelry, bracelets, that kind of thing. Starchy shirts. Sometimes you get a lot of so we make them take their collar, their shirt off if it's too noisy. But typically we live with most of those kinds of sounds. It's not too bad.
Yeah, it's just really interesting. I need to try with a loop group, definitely. I'm really interested to see how.
Well, it doesn't, now that you know the idea of it, you can obviously put anything together, and you basically only need people who aren't afraid of their own voice, and who can kind of improv. Improv acting is good because basically what these people do is they make up conversation on the spot. None of it's really scripted. A lot of loop groupers do have binders of material. Like, for example, a typical loop group scenario is a hospital, for example, and we have a dramatic shot in a patient's room, but we want to get the hallway behind them. So we need doctors conferring with patients, a nurse's station, the hospital pages. Doctor blah blah blah, please report to radiology, and so they have all these terms at their disposal, and most of these loop groupers actually can sound like physicians and doctors. Like they know all the mumbo jumbo of the blood types, and they just have pages and pages and pages of things to say, so they don't have to think completely off the top of their heads. But some of them have been doing it so long that they can do that, or they can sound like police officers, and the procedural things that police officers say. They a lot of them get transcripts off of police radios, actual police radio conversations that have happened, so that they can sound authentic. And in the example of CSI Las Vegas or any show that we do, they'll typically have maps of the cities they're in, so that they're actually using real street names from that city, as opposed to just turn right on Elm Street. Like they'll get the real deal, and they can talk about the actual airport in that city, the actual some big buildings or landmarks. So they go almost overboard to be authentic, but they take what they do very seriously, and they try to have real conversations in the background, knowing full well that they're going to be played really, really quietly in the end. But they're going for it, so they do a good job. But anyway, to get to your point, if you have a group of friends that are a little bit, they can ham it up a little bit, and aren't afraid to just sort of mimic sort of having conversations. That's all you really need, is that little hubbub in the background, blah 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 blah, blah, and it it works, because when you shoot a scene and you have a crowd, the crowd behind the actors in a real production aren't saying a word; they're just kind of moving their lips. So we fill it in later on with loop group, and it seems like a bizarre way to do things, but that's the way we've always done it.
No, it's fantastic. I'll be trying to listen out. I'll try and look up on YouTube some loop groups and CSI and see
I've
if
never
it'll
looked up.
work.
I wonder if you could find some actual. And some sound libraries have some Luke Group Wallace stuff.
Mm. No, brilliant. And in terms of the level that you're recording them at, obviously we know that they're pretty close to infinity when they get to the final mix. But in terms of when you're recording them, what kind of, to anyone who's also got like a Pro Tools system or anything else like that, what roughly are you kind of aiming for?
That's a difficult question because I'm not a meter person as much as I am a listening person. I typically monitor at about 83 dB, which is roughly about, I guess, a normal listening level when you watch TV, I suppose, or a movie on TV. So it's not quiet and it's not booming loud. It's just kind of that what you'd like to watch a movie at home, I think, would be the best way to describe it. So I mix their stuff slightly below how loud I want to hear dialogue. So I'm listening more than watching a meter, and because there's no point in me mixing it really loud because I know it's going to be really quiet. So I give it, like, I would say the best answer would be 70-80% full. You know,
Yeah.
where my main dialogue would be full up, I put this stuff about 70% of that, if that makes sense. So it's a good medium level. The murmury stuff that I described earlier, where they're all way off the mic looking at the walls, that stuff can typically be pretty quiet because even turning my microphone up is almost as loud as I can turn it up, they're still way off the mic. So it's almost going to play the way I'm recording it for the mixer. He's probably going to just pull that back a little bit and he'll be fine with it. But that's about where that goes.
Yeah, I keep meaning I need to find out more about calibration of speakers and things, but I will hold that for a completely separate conversation.
It's not too difficult, but yeah, you get a little sound thing. And here in America, we have I don't even know if they sell them at Radio Shack anymore, but they're little cheap $40 sound thing from Radio Shack, and you dial in the number and you put on your sound meter in Pro Tools some white noise or pink noise, and you figure out what 85 decibels is on your volume knob, and you make a little mark. And 85 is sort of like film level,
yeah.
And anywhere between 79 and 85 is sort of the listening level. And wow. You pick a comfortable listening level for yourself, and you make sure that you always mix at that level. You don't change it, and that way, if you're recording or mixing, you're staying at a very steady volume always. Because if you mess with that, you're messing with your if you don't have a fixed position, it's a moving target. You'll never have even recording levels or anything. So
yeah, no. Early on when I got into doing bits of mixing and things, people were just turning it down on the speakers to listen to it. I was like, no, you can't. You've just changed everything. Where are you going to go? So with the kind of the meter, it's just like a sound meter, I guess, is it? And then you're putting that where you're going to sit.
Yeah, you kind of hold
Optimum.
it. Try to see if I have it right here. Actually, it's basically a loudness. Where is it? I usually keep it nearby. I don't think I see it right now though.
That's all right. No, it's yeah, because a few people just mentioned the 83, 85, and I'm still, because I don't have essentially a proper studio by any means, but I'm always trying to think in terms of Pro Tools metering, and I kind of turn my speakers so I hear comfortably when it's like -20, but that's just my calibration personally.
You'd be surprised. I think you would find that your personal calibration is very close to 79 to 85.
Yeah.
It probably sits right around 81, 83, and that's kind of what that number is all about. It's it's probably where you listen to talk radio, and it's where you listen to most TV shows that you're interested. Not background, because some people do. Like with music, it's kind of all over the place. You listen really loudly, and then you also go to a really quiet place to see if your bass and your drums are translating. So music's a little bit different because people listen to music differently than TV, but and film is more towards the 85 because film has much quieter places than TV and much louder places than TV. So film is like full scale, runs the whole thing, whereas broadcast television has some constraints that are sort of legally put in place. So it's a much different thing to mix. But typically, you can do all of it from right. I find I like 83. That works for me.
Sweet spot.
Some people go towards 85, but to me that's a little bit ear splitting, and my ears start to hurt with all the dialogue. So
you're getting a little like essy and stuff like that.
Yeah, and
it's a little harsh.
And you also get after many hours you get sensitive to that frequency range, the mid range, and you start making bad decisions too because you start getting desensitized over time, and you start turning up high end where you shouldn't, just because it's been beaten out of your ears after 6 hours, and so you have to be careful. And that's kind of the point of finding that comfortable range so you can stay with it, for many hours. And it must be, I can imagine it's tough for you with the headphones as well.
Yeah. It's definitely all about it's listening to what you want and trying to listen to what you obviously don't want, and trying to figure out if it's outside of your headphones or inside your headphones. I mean, I have a control room, so I'm spoiled. That would be tough for me. Yeah, you're like the ideal production sound recordist for animation.
Yes. Apart
from obviously the talent, which never changes. But that's just a little joke for us. It's fine. So yes, right. We talked about. So let's talk more about kind of the animation aspects, because again, I've completely gone off on one on loop groups because they're just amazing and you can go for hours. But in terms of the animation, what really kind of draws you to kind of recording animation?
Well, the animation was kind of my introduction into post-production. When I was doing music, a friend of mine worked for Nickelodeon, and Nickelodeon had their own recording studio actually in the building, and they only had one engineer, and they needed a second. And he asked me if I would come and help out, and so I said, yeah, sure, that sounds like fun, and went in and did a bunch of, at the time, whatever those cartoons were, SpongeBob, Fairly Odd Parents, all those Nickelodeon things from about 2000, 2005, and it was a lot, it was way different than anything I'd done really. I mean, music, like TV and like film, it all centers around the human voice. In the end, it's all about the human voice. If you think about it, all good music is based around what the singer is saying, and in TV, the saying is dialogue is king. So everything must be understood and must be heard and must be, the energy, the emotion, everything is going to be conveyed through the human voice. And it's no different from animation. It's even more important in animation because that's carrying the whole human content of any drawn character is going to be whoever is voicing that character. And it's just, with animation, it's like live action, except the dialogue is, times 10, because it's way more personality, way more push and pull and dynamic, and animation is really about trying to explode through the medium. Like, you want to hear that the voice needs to leap through the TV kind of. So it's the same thing, but just it's just way more of everything. So in that situation, we're typically using large diaphragm microphones like U87s or Neumann 170s. We use a lot at Warner Brothers, and all nice close recording. It's maybe this far apart, King's Speech sort of thing. They're right there, and it's and everything is it's all about clarity, and that's what the voice director is there, and she's trying to get the actors to stay up and energetic, and she's to the right of me, and her job is to sort of guide the actors. She'll say, okay, we're going to do these first 2 pages of dialogue. So she'll sort of describe the action to everybody. She'll set up the scene, and she'll say, okay, let's give it a try, and we'll go, and we'll record in earnest. And I'm literally soloing microphones while I read the script, jumping from character to character, and trying to catch, because we record onto one track. So if we have a room full of 7 characters, we're recording onto one dialogue track. Now, some people record onto 7 separate tracks, but the reason why that's not a good idea is because it's really hard to monitor all 7 tracks at the same time. It sounds like 7 open microphones. So you really can never tell what you're getting. So we go onto one track, and we just have to tell the actors that they can't overlap, because I need to cut in and out of each one. So I've pre-marked my script, and I'm reading, switching. Sometimes I mess up. It's okay. We go back and we catch it. But I typically do my best to stay with, our run that we're doing, and we'll finish that, and the voice director will say, that was great. You need to, on this line, you were a little bit flat. You need to be more up. And she'll give a second round of sort of direction, and we'll take a second stab at it. And then at that point, maybe we have most of the scene done, and now it's only about maybe 1 or 2 specific lines that are still not quite there. And then they'll just go and pick up those specific lines rather than do the whole run again. And they'll go through the whole script that way, maybe 1, 2, 3-page runs twice for backup, and then just the specific pickups. And when you work that way, you make it to the end of the script pretty quickly. So they'll typically finish a half-an-hour show in about 4 hours. And they'll fly through the whole script, get everything they need to do. The actors will all go away, and come back next week and do the next episode. But that's kind of, and that's so that's the main difference there. Is it's much easier to get great recording, and here now, great recording is essential. Now we're going for super precise, super great. The slightest pop on a microphone is a redo. If somebody knocks a microphone or makes a paper noise, we do it again. Now we don't want any extraneous sound. Sometimes people will, in their excitement, knock the music stand and do all that kind of thing. So here we are trying for pristine, great quality, and we keep doing it until everybody's good, and usually we accomplish all that at the end of 4 hours, and everybody goes home, and they're a lot less serious. Obviously, we're doing cartoons. A lot more laughing, a lot more. A lot of these guys are. A lot of these, especially in animation. I mean, most of the voices that you hear you could fit in a room of like 20, 30 people. That's every voice you hear on TV. I see the same people for many different shows, same actors, and they know what they're doing. They all have, 8, 9, 10 voices that they do really, really well, and they can do dialect, they can do accents. They're funny. they're good on their feet. They improvise. They bring a lot to the. You have a script, but then they bring a lot of extra stuff to it, and their own ideas, and so it's a little bit crazy if you're hoping for organization. It can sometimes mess with your head. You can get kind of frustrated as the recording engineer, but you kind of have to go with it.
Yeah, amazing. I mean,
it's like bottled chaos, but it's fun.
Yeah, and to think that there's only like 30 people and stuff, because I know that you've done a few like episodes of Family Guy and all sorts of stuff. Are the people that are doing it fitting across kind of an unusual range? Because I mean, you've also done like Looney Tunes and things like that. Are the people in Family Guy and Looney Tunes, and is it that diverse?
Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes some people go across from, like, some of the guys that do some of the crazy stuff also do some of the more serious sort of superhero-y kind of, more like Superman kind of things, and then they go back to a wacky voice. And some people are very specific, and they only do certain types of people have like a specific talent that they're called in for usually. Some people are very good at the heroic thing. A lot of times for like the WB superheroes, they'll get name actors. So they'll get somebody who's well known in the live action world, and they'll come in and play the Superman role or the Batman role. And that just helps with promotion as well. Yeah, you get a name actor to play a voice, like they do in the cinematic releases, the animated cinematic things where it's a famous voice. The voice actors kind of get a little bit bummed out because they feel like that should be their turf. And here these live action actors just sort of saunter in and get the choice role, but but it's still a very interesting thing, and but yeah, these people do span across a lot of different types of things. The Looney Tunes thing, for example, the guy that does Bugs Bunny also does Daffy Duck, and he also does Foghorn Leghorn, kind of like the original Mel Blanc did. He does a lot of those voices. So for him, we have to record obviously all the Bugs Bunny first, come back and do all the Daffy Duck, because it'd be too difficult to kind of go in and out of voices, So it's easier to do it that way, and which means that as I'm recording it, I don't really understand what's going on at all because I'm getting it in pieces.
Yeah.
It's not until I see it when my son's watching on TV that I kind of go, oh, that's how. That's a very funny script. I didn't notice that.
Brilliant. Well, I'm very conscious that we've got to about an hour, I think. So I think that's so much of your time, and it's been an absolute fantastic talk. I suppose my only last little thing is: have you ever been in a loop group? Have you ever snuck your own voice in there?
No, but I have attempted some loops just to feel what it felt like. It's strange because I feel like I have all this knowledge from having done it, and I will say that when you actually are the person on the microphone staring at the screen and hearing the beeps and watching the line go across, it's very disconcerting, and it's so I have sympathy for the actors that do it, because where I sit, I'm giving all this, to me, what it seems clear advice, and I understand why we call it red light fever. When you're actually the person having to record, the same goes for a musical instrument. When you know the red light's on, and you're actually recording, there's something that can seize up and make you not operate how you normally would. So, but I have been used in the backgrounds on some animations where they needed an extra person shouting or something. So I have snuck in that one.
Nice.
But it's a tough thing to do, and I can't. And that's me trying to do it with somebody else's picture. You have to imagine doing it watching your own face. Big giant head up on that screen and feeling self-conscious about seeing yourself and hearing your own voice and redoing your own voice. It's I can see why it's a tough thing to do.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, I think that that just about wraps it up. I mean, I'll just say kind of goodbye to everyone that was watching, and I'll kind of leave the final words to you. Then we'll go offline, and then we'll have a little kind of personal goodbye, because that's a little better. So it's goodbye from me, and Bill, final words over to you.
Gosh, final words. I would just say that anybody who's coming up today, there's an immense amount of knowledge out there that didn't exist, but 15 years ago online to look up, and you really have to just kind of dig and search around, and don't be discouraged. There's a lot of I think people try to be a little bit too big for their own britches in some of these forums sometimes, and I could see where that would be discouraging to somebody coming up. But don't be put off by it. Look around. So every time you look around, you'll look, and then all of a sudden you'll find a treasure trove of real information. And the best advice is you don't have to wait till you get that job to do the thing. You can start doing it on your friend's film now. If you have, obviously Pro Tools is easy to acquire. If you just start using it and get to know the program and building your own sound effects, recording, sit in all the chairs, do everything. I mean, I mix, I sound design, I have my own sound effects library, and when I can't find what I need, I go out and record it. I have a little Zoom recorder. It's a consumer model. It's nothing fancy. You don't need fancy microphones or equipment, and you can get incredibly satisfying results just by doing it. And the only way you become something is by doing. So just do it. It's a little bit daunting to think sometimes you have to get to that fancy recording studio spot to feel like you're actually doing it. But you can, these days, certainly you can have a very nice digital camera and a very nice recording without too much cost, cash outlay, and just start doing things. Start making stories on film and making the soundtracks for them. You'd be surprised at how satisfying and easy it actually is, and that kind of action and momentum leads to the real professional situations. So that's what I would say.
Well, that is phenomenal advice, I have to say. So thank you again very much, Bill, and goodbye, everyone.